Hi, I'm Arlen. 17 years. That's how long my family pretended I didn't exist. They praised my brother like royalty, while I was the shadow at every family photo, the name no one said out loud. When Grandpa passed, they thought the crown would land on Elias's head, like always. But they didn't know Grandpa had left me everything, the company, the estate. And when I walked into the courtroom, my father laughed in my face. Pathetic loser. Get out. Then the bailiff said, "All rise for the presiding judge." And suddenly, I wasn't their disappointment anymore. I was the one holding the gavel. But what they did next, that's where the real story begins. The courthouse smelled like polished oak and salt from the harbor wind outside. I stood in the hallway, staring at the heavy mahogany doors that separated me from my family. Their voices slipped through the cracks. Laughter, a sound too familiar, too cruelly warm to belong to me. I recognized every tone, my father's booming certainty, my mother's careful agreement, and Elias, always Elias, speaking like a man who believed the world owed him the air he breathed. My hand hovered over the door handle. 17 years since I'd heard those voices in one place. I told myself I was ready, but my fingers trembled anyway. It's funny how even at 39, the child they ignored still lives somewhere inside you, waiting to be acknowledged. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I was 10 again. Christmas morning, wrapping paper everywhere, my brother holding up a brand new bicycle while I unfolded a pair of socks. "You'll understand when you're older," my mother said, her smile soft but distant. Elias rode circles around the living room while Dad called him Champ. I remember thinking, I'm in the same room, but it's like I'm invisible. The sound of laughter in the present snapped me back. I adjusted my tie, cheap, black, bought yesterday at a local store. The clerk had asked if it was for a funeral. In a way, it was. The clerk at the reception desk looked up from her clipboard as I approached. Name? Arlen Gage. She flipped through the pages. Her eyebrows twitched. "Oh, you're that Gage." I almost smiled. "I suppose I am." When I stepped inside, the room went quiet, just long enough for me to feel the weight of every stare. My father's jaw tightened. My mother pretended to fix her blouse. Elias leaned back in his chair, that easy grin never leaving his face. "You shouldn't be here," my father muttered. "This is family business." I met his eyes. That's what I thought for 17 years. No one responded. The attorney, an older man with sharp glasses, coughed awkwardly and gestured toward the table. "Mr. Gage, you can have a seat." The room looked like every courtroom I'd ever worked in, except colder. The mahogany walls seemed to close in. The portrait of my grandfather hung slightly crooked on the far wall. Dust had settled on the frame, dulling the brass plate with his name. I crossed the room and straightened it. "Leave it," my father barked. "He's gone." I lowered my hand slowly. "Not quite," I said quietly, taking my seat. The attorney shuffled the papers. "If we could begin..." But before he could start, Elias spoke. "Let's not drag this out. We all know how this goes." I looked at him, the same confident smirk, the same arrogance that got him everything in life. He didn't recognize the way I was looking back. That's the thing about people who erase you. They never expect you to return with power. As the lawyer began reading, the words echoed through the wood-paneled room. My father leaned back, arms folded, wearing the certainty of a man who had already won. My mother dabbed her eyes as if performing for a camera that wasn't there. Then the attorney cleared his throat. "And to my grandson, Arlen Gage. The room froze. A chair scraped against the floor. Elias stopped smiling. My mother looked up sharply. My father frowned as if the name didn't make sense. The attorney continued. I leave controlling interest in Gage Maritime Holdings and the oceanfront estate in Kennebunkport. Silence. Heavy and complete. My heart didn't race. I didn't grin. I just looked at the table, tracing the grain of the wood with my thumb. He may be gone, but his will is about to speak louder than all of you. The attorney set down the papers. That concludes the primary section. I could feel their eyes burning through me. For years, I'd been the failure, the outcast, the son who didn't belong. Now, in one sentence, my grandfather had rewritten all of it. My father leaned back, the old smirk returning to his lips. That's a clerical error, he said slowly. Fix it. My father's voice cut through the silence like a sharp crack in frozen glass. You heard me, he said, his tone rising. Read that part again. The attorney hesitated, his fingers trembling slightly as he flipped the papers back. His glasses slipped down the bridge of his nose. The will clearly states, he began, his voice steady but cautious, that the controlling interest in Gage Maritime Holdings and all accompanying assets shall go to Mr. Arlen Gage. You mean to tell me this? Outsider gets everything? My father's words bounced off the marble walls. The echo lingered. Even the seagulls outside seemed to fall silent. I didn't move. My hands stayed clasped on the table, palms together, as though I were praying for patience instead of mercy. I'd been told that phrase my entire life. You're not Gage material. The tone had always been the same. Dismissive, cold, final. Now the man who built that line into a weapon was losing his grip. His fingers twitched against the armrest. Not from age, but from something he couldn't control anymore. Elias leaned forward, half smirking, half confused. Dad, he's bluffing. There's no way Grandpa trusted him with that much money. Not him. My father turned his glare on the lawyer again. Show me the date. 6 months before Mr. Henry Gage passed, the attorney replied. It was updated personally, notarized and witnessed. The original copy was sealed at his request. 6 months. That meant Grandpa had known he was running out of time, away, and still made the choice himself. Elias scoffed. Come on, Dad. This is ridiculous. He left for college and never came back. He doesn't even know how this family works. I breathed in slowly. The room smelled of dust, old varnish, and tension. That's because this family only works one way, I said. Yours. Elias's grin faded. You think you're better than us because you play judge in a black robe? I looked at him. No. I think I finally learned to live without needing you to see me. His laugh was sharp, but I saw the flicker of fear behind it. He didn't expect me to sound calm. He expected the boy who used to fold under their words. For a moment, I drifted back to that day in college. I had been standing in the kitchen holding a letter, a full scholarship to Columbia Law. My father read it once, then tore it in half. You'll work under Elias, he said. That's where you belong. I remember the sound of the paper tearing. That was the day I left, with one suitcase and $20 in my pocket. I never looked back. The attorney's voice pulled me back. The assets total approximately $74 million, including the company, the estate, and personal holdings. My father slammed his hand on the table. I want to see the original. You already are, the lawyer said quietly. Elias leaned back, shaking his head. This is insane. Then he chuckled low and cruel. You can't seriously believe Grandpa left all that to him. The man barely came home for Christmas. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a small folder. I laid it gently on the table and opened it. Inside was a notarized copy with Grandpa's handwriting across the bottom. For the one who was never seen, but always just. The words hung there. I traced them lightly with my finger. I remembered the way Grandpa used to look at me across the dinner table when no one else would meet my eyes. There had always been something knowing in his silence. My father's breathing grew heavier. "That's sentimental nonsense," he snapped. Then he pulled another folder from his leather briefcase. "Here's the real will, updated 2 weeks later. Signed, sealed, witnessed." The attorney frowned. "That's unusual. I wasn't informed of a second update." I leaned forward. "May I?" He hesitated, then slid the papers across to me. My father smirked as I unfolded them. "See? Henry fixed his mistake before he died." I studied the page. The signature was close, painfully close, but there it was, a tiny hesitation in the H of Henry. Grandpa's hand had always moved in one clean stroke, and the coffee ring, faint, overlapping the ink, it didn't belong there. Grandpa never drank coffee near paperwork. He used tea. Always. My father waited for me to react, to falter. Instead, I folded the document carefully and slid it back toward him. "Interesting," I said. Elias laughed. "He's speechless. Guess that robe didn't teach him how to lose." Inside, my mind was already spinning. I'd notarized enough documents in my life to recognize a forgery, and this one was amateur. He used my own craft against me, I thought. My father's arrogance has fingerprints. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. My mother dabbed her eyes again, pretending to be fragile, but her hands were steady. She knew something. They all did. I wasn't ready to expose it. Not yet. Let them believe they had the upper hand. Let them relax, build their lie higher, make it grander. My father leaned forward until I could smell his cologne, the same brand he'd worn my entire life. "You think that robe makes you equal?" he said, his voice a low growl. "You're still my son." I met his gaze, unblinking. Not anymore. He froze. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. The attorney gathered his papers quickly, sensing the tension was about to crack. "Perhaps we should reconvene tomorrow," he said. No one moved. I rose from my chair slowly, straightened my jacket, and picked up my folder. Let him build his lie higher, I thought. The higher it stands, the harder it will fall. Outside, the hallway light had changed. Afternoon shadows stretching long across the marble floor. The air felt colder as I walked out, but my hands didn't shake. I already knew what I had to do next. That night, I went to Grandpa's house one last time, where I found the proof he thought I'd never see. The rain had just begun to fall by the time I pulled off the main road toward the old house in Cape Elizabeth. The headlights caught on wet pine needles and the peeling mailbox that still read H. Gage. I hadn't been back since the funeral. Even then, I didn't stay long. Couldn't. There was too much silence in this place. Too many memories hiding in the corners, waiting to ask why I left and never came back. I parked near the porch. The boards groaned under my weight, same as they always had. The front door stuck as usual, so I gave it that little shoulder nudge I'd learned as a kid. It opened with a sigh, and I stepped into the dark. It smelled like old books and salt air. A hint of pipe tobacco still clung to the air, faint but unmistakable. Grandpa's scent, the kind that lingered in his sweaters, the ones he always let me wear even when Mom said they were too big. I didn't turn on the lights right away. Let the house speak first. The wind howled against the windows. Lightning flashed beyond the curtains. I moved slowly, like a guest in someone else's life. Every step stirred dust. Every creak felt like a voice. It was all still here. The sea glass bowl in the entryway. The framed maps of the Atlantic. The coat he never wore, but never got rid of either. I made my way to his study, the room he never let anyone else clean. The door was shut, and when I opened it, I half expected to see him there, hunched over his desk with a pen in hand. But the chair was empty, the fireplace cold. His presence, though, still filled the space like mist. A note was pinned to one of the drawers with an old thumbtack. The paper was thick, cream-colored. His handwriting was unmistakable, tight, deliberate, and elegant, for the one who remembers what others forgot. I stared at it for a long moment before pulling the drawer open. Inside there was a small wooden box, a leather-bound journal, and, unexpectedly, an unlit birthday candle. It was blue, striped, slightly bent at the tip. I picked it up carefully. The scent hit me immediately. Vanilla frosting. I knew that candle. I hadn't seen it in over 30 years. I was 8, my birthday. Mom had made a cake for Elias with thick frosting and colorful sprinkles. Mine was smaller, plainer. 4 candles, 3 were lit. 1 sat unburnt at the end. "We'll save it for next year," she'd said. I waited a year, then another. It never got lit. I never asked why, but Grandpa had kept it. "He saw everything I thought no one noticed," I whispered. I set the candle aside gently and opened the box. Inside were loose pages, bank receipts, and what looked like share transfer documents. My breath caught when I saw the letterhead. Gage Maritime Holdings. Dates matched the last 2 years of Grandpa's life. Transfers, disbursements, legal signatures. All pointing to one thing. He'd been preparing to hand me everything long before he died. The journal confirmed it. Page after page of notes. In his hand, conversations with lawyers, thoughts on succession, disappointment in my father's decisions, and at the very end, a line written in faded black ink. "Truth doesn't need noise, Arlen. Just proof." I sat down slowly in his chair, the leather still warm from memory. The thunder rumbled again outside. The storm was picking up. But inside, something had gone still. He'd planned it all, quietly, without a speech or announcement. While the rest of them clawed at power, Grandpa had written justice into the margins. But the part that hurt the most wasn't the betrayal from my father or Elias. It was realizing how much Grandpa must have endured, watching it all unfold. He saw how they treated me, how they dismissed me, and he waited, trusting that one day I'd find this. I looked at the candle again. Then I reached into the drawer and found an old matchbook with the name of the diner we used to go to on Sunday mornings. I struck a match. The flame sputtered, then steadied, and this time I lit the candle myself. I watched the tiny flame flicker against the dark, against the storm that pounded the windows. It was small, fragile, but steady. They taught me silence, I thought. Maybe it's time to let silence speak louder than them. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. For once, I wasn't looking for their approval. I had Grandpa's voice now, in ink and memory, and that was louder than anything they ever gave me. By morning, I wasn't the same man who walked into that courtroom, and I was done staying quiet. Sleep hadn't come easy. I'd left the candle burning until the wax collapsed into itself, the scent of vanilla lingering like a whisper I wasn't ready to let go of. But by the time the first light cracked across the Atlantic, I had already laid out my suit. Gray, tailored, quiet power. This wasn't the sun showing up for another rejection. This was a man stepping into a war he didn't start, but was ready to finish. Downtown Portland was buzzing as usual. People rushed along the sidewalks, lattes in hand, conversations echoing between glass and steel. I pulled into the reserved lot behind Gage Enterprises and parked in the spot that used to have Elias's name on it. They'd removed his plate after Grandpa's death, but they hadn't replaced it with mine. Not yet. The glass building loomed above me, pristine and sharp-edged, reflecting the city like it owned it. It always felt too clean, too perfect, like the family that built it, polished on the outside, rotten beneath the surface. Inside the lobby, a young woman in a blazer looked up from her desk. Her smile froze mid-motion when I stepped forward. "Good morning," I said. "I have a meeting." She blinked, glancing at the list. "Name, please?" "Arlen Gage." A pause, then, unsure, "Mr. Gage, which one?" I gave her a small smile. "The one you weren't expecting." She buzzed me in. The security guard didn't even look up. As I rode the elevator to the top floor, I glanced at my reflection in the mirrored walls. I didn't see the kid who used to mop the halls after hours, the one who was told to earn his place. I saw someone they no longer recognized. And maybe that was the point. The boardroom was full when I walked in. The chairs were filled with executives, lawyers, and those same family advisors who'd spent the last 2 decades pretending I didn't exist. Victor sat at the head, his tie knotted with precision. Elias lounged beside him, legs crossed, sipping something expensive. My father didn't even look up. "This is a private meeting," he said. "You're not invited." I walked to the end of the table and calmly placed the leather folder on the glass. "Then you'll forgive the intrusion." The room stilled. Every pair of eyes turned to me like I'd spoken a different language. Victor finally met my gaze. "What's that supposed to be?" "Proof," I said, opening the folder and sliding out Grandpa's ledger. His hand, his will, his words. Elias scoffed. "This is a stunt." I read the note aloud. Grandpa's handwriting was familiar, slow, and certain, for the one who was never seen but always just. The shares are his. Let truth settle what pride never could. Silence fell like a weight. Mr. Rhodes, the CFO, shifted in his seat. I remembered him from the funeral, too eager to offer condolences, too rehearsed. Now he dabbed his forehead with a napkin from under the water pitcher. I looked at him. "You were the one who notarized the revised will, weren't you?" He opened his mouth, closed it again. Victor's voice changed, smooth and rehearsed. "Son, let's not do this here. Come to my office. Let's talk. No need to make a mess in front of the staff." "This is family business," I replied evenly. "Isn't that what you told me yesterday?" His jaw tightened. Elias leaned forward, his tone mocking. "What do you want, Arlen? An apology? A pat on the head?" I ignored him and turned to the rest of the room. "You all sat here thinking the heir had already been chosen. But Grandpa made his decision long before he died. You just didn't bother to notice." Victor lit a cigar, exhaling slowly. "You're playing judge again," he said. "Careful, you might start believing it." I stared at the smoke curling upward between us. "You taught me to lie for approval," I said quietly. "Grandpa taught me when to stop." The moment held, brittle and silent. Victor stood. "This meeting is adjourned." I didn't move. "This isn't over." He walked past me without looking back. It never was. I stood alone in that room of glass and silence. The others filed out, some avoiding my gaze, others offering glances that weren't quite respect, but weren't dismissal anymore either. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible in this place. But even then, as the door closed behind the last suit, I couldn't shake it. The ache. That small, stubborn ache of wanting him to look at me the way he looked at Elias. With pride. With something other than calculation or contempt. He never did. That evening, a journalist called me. Someone had leaked a story claiming I bribed Grandpa before his death. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, messages, notifications stacking one after another until the glow from the screen painted the apartment walls in restless light. I didn't answer any of them. I just sat there, motionless, watching my name scroll across the evening news ticker at the bottom of the TV. Judge Arlen Gage under investigation for alleged inheritance manipulation. The words looped over and over again. I could almost hear my father's voice behind them, calm, deliberate, victorious. In one day, he'd turned my silence into guilt. I muted the TV and leaned back in my chair, letting the soft hum of the refrigerator fill the quiet. The apartment was small but comfortable, overlooking Casco Bay. The water shimmered faintly under the moonlight, the tide whispering against the docks. It was supposed to be peaceful, but tonight it felt like the world outside was holding its breath. My laptop was still open on the table. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Comments, thousands of them. Typical privileged judge. Of course he bribed the old man. He's just like the rest of them. I scrolled until the words blurred. It didn't matter what strangers thought, but somehow it still hit like a punch to the ribs. I closed the lid and sat in the dim light of the desk lamp, staring at the stack of newspapers. They all carried the same story, the same narrative my father had orchestrated with precision. A lie loud enough to drown the truth. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from an old colleague. "I'm sorry, Arlen. They're saying there'll be an ethics review. You should prepare." I didn't reply. I just exhaled and rubbed my temples. The candle from Grandpa's house sat on the corner of my desk, unlit. Its wax had started to crack. I reached for it, ran my thumb along its edge, and whispered, "Not yet." I needed something solid, something that couldn't be twisted or forged. And then I remembered it. The leather-bound journal. It had been sitting in the back of my closet for years, still wrapped in the same string Grandpa tied around it the day he handed it to me. I got up, crossed the room, and pulled it from an old storage box. The leather was worn smooth, the corners frayed. When I untied it, a faint scent of tobacco and cedar rose up, like he was still here. I flipped to the first page. His handwriting, small, deliberate, filled the paper. The same words he'd whispered to me the day I graduated from college. "Keep your notes close, Arlen. Truth fades fast in loud rooms." Back then, I thought he was just being sentimental. Now I knew better. Page after page, there were entries about business dealings, meetings, small notes written in shorthand only he and I could read. But what stopped me cold was a page halfway through, marked with a folded envelope. Inside it, a single line. "If they ever turn the paper against you, remember, ink never lies." My throat tightened. I turned the next few pages, and my stomach sank. There were photocopies, company documents, old agreements, letters with my father's signature. But next to them were Grandpa's annotations in red ink, tiny arrows, circles, one word repeated more than once: forgery. He'd known. He'd known all along. I pressed my hand against the page, tracing the faded outlines of his notes. My father hadn't just forged one document to steal the company. He'd been manipulating paperwork for years, quietly, carefully, like a man who thought he could outsmart time itself. The proof was right there, but holding it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. For years, I had blamed myself for walking away, for not fighting harder to be seen. But he'd never wanted a son, only a reflection that obeyed him. I stared at the journal under the lamplight, my pulse steadying. The ache in my chest was shifting, hardening into something else. Determination, maybe. He thinks I'm still the boy who wanted his approval, I whispered. Let him believe that. The night stretched on. I began cross-referencing every document, every note, every inconsistency Grandpa had marked. Page by page, the story of my father's deceit took shape. Transfers, signatures, false witnesses. Even Elias's name appeared, again and again. They'd both been in it. The candle sat beside me, unlit. I promised myself I'd light it when the truth burned bright enough to be seen. Hours passed. The world outside faded into darkness. My hands were smudged with ink, my eyes strained, but I kept going. Every piece of evidence I uncovered wasn't just a clue. It was a memory, a ghost of the man who believed in me when no one else did. At around 2 a.m, I found it, a document buried between 2 accounting sheets, a transfer of shares, signed by both Victor and Elias, dated 2 weeks after Grandpa's recorded death. My breath caught. The edges of the paper trembled in my hands. You didn't just bury him, I whispered. You robbed him. The candle flickered in the draft from the open window, though I hadn't lit it. For a moment, I imagined it was him, reminding me that silence could still speak. By dawn, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to expose them in court. I was going to let them expose themselves. The morning fog was thick as soup, curling around the edges of the road while the world slowly stretched awake. I drove in silence, the only sound in the car the rhythmic click of the turn signal and the steady churn of my thoughts. Elias picked up on the second ring. We need to talk, I said plainly. Face to face. There was a pause, not long, but just enough to measure expectation. Now? I didn't say yes. He already knew. 10 minutes later, I pulled into the underground garage beneath Gage Enterprises. I hadn't parked in that building since I was a teenager sweeping its floors during summer break, told I needed to build character. I parked in the visitor slot, on purpose. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, mirrored panels casting back the reflection of a man I barely recognized. Gray suit, jaw tight, eyes steady. Not the boy who once waited for Elias to sneak him leftovers when our father pretended I wasn't at the dinner table. That boy had wanted to belong. I didn't. Elias was already waiting when I stepped into his private office. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Portland skyline. A glass desk, spotless. Family portraits lined one shelf. None of them included me. Well, he said with that signature half-smile, you've made quite a name for yourself lately, little brother. So have you, I replied, stepping further in. Fraud's a tough look, even for you. He laughed lightly. Still dramatic, I see. I didn't sit. I placed the folder I brought on his desk, opened it slowly. Inside were the forged transfer documents. Clear, undeniable, damning. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes darted down too quickly. He reached for the papers, fingers hovering. You're coming in here with accusations now? He said, voice lighter than his clenched jaw. Dad did what he had to do. You think you can run this company with your little speeches and courtroom posture? I didn't respond, just slipped my phone from my pocket, let my thumb press record without ceremony, and placed it face down on the corner of his desk. His attention stayed on the documents, not noticing. "You don't get it, Arlen," he went on, tone sharpening. "This company, it's more than Grandpa's sentimental nonsense. It needed stability, structure, not some idealist who thinks being right gets you respect. And forging signatures, that part of the new structure too?" I asked quietly. Elias scoffed. "You think you're above it? You think Grandpa didn't play his own games? Dad cleaned it up. After the funeral, he went through every file, every account. He had to. You would have ruined everything." There it was. I didn't move. I didn't blink. Just let him keep digging. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration slipping through the cracks of his calm. "You don't understand the pressure, the expectations. Dad did what was necessary. You were always the wild card." I waited, letting the silence push him. Then he caught himself. "What are you planning to do with that?" he asked, suddenly wary. His eyes flicked toward my phone, the realization crawling across his face like slow poison. I didn't answer right away. I just looked him in the eye and said, "I'm giving you a choice. Which side of this story do you want to be on?" He stared at me, and for a moment I saw something shift. Not guilt, not shame, just calculation. "You always thought truth wins," he muttered. "It doesn't. Power does." "Then you've already lost," I said. We stood there in a stare-down, years of resentment unspoken between us. Two sons raised in the same house, but shaped by different truths. He in the shadow of praise, me in the echo of silence. I turned, walked to the door. At the threshold, I paused, took one last look back, not at him, but at the documents I left on the desk. Bait. Bait. I knew he couldn't resist. I left without another word. Back in my car, I waited. Not long. Maybe 5 minutes. Then the call came through. I didn't answer. Just let it connect to the backup recorder wired through the Bluetooth. Elias's voice, tight, urgent, spilled into the car's silence. "Dad, he knows everything. What do we do?" I sat there, engine idling, a small, slow breath filling my lungs. The war had begun, not with screaming or lawsuits, but with words they thought no one else would hear. I turned off the ignition, but didn't move. Outside, morning had taken hold, clean, crisp, almost too calm. A strange contrast to the chaos I knew was waiting inside those glass doors. By 8 a.m., the front steps of Gage Enterprises were crowded. News vans, reporters, even a drone or two hovering above like vultures. Headlines were already rolling across the morning broadcasts. Illegally amended will, Gage Empire in jeopardy. They knew. Everyone did now. Inside the building, security looked tenser than usual. One of the guards who'd once waved me off with a smirk now avoided my gaze as I passed. They always see the uniform first. And I was wearing it today, not as a costume, but a declaration. The black judicial robe. Let them read it like scripture. My office phone rang as I reached the elevator. I picked up without checking. "You did this?" The voice was sharp, too controlled to be anything but furious. "Good morning to you too, Father." "You think leaking those documents clears your name?" I paused. "I didn't leak anything." Silence. "I just uncovered the truth," I added. "It leaked itself." He hung up. An hour later, we were summoned to the boardroom. Not invited. Summoned. That distinction mattered now. The top floor of the building looked the same. Polished floors, long table, a wall of city view behind the chairman's seat. But the atmosphere had curdled. I stepped in last, the room already buzzing with restless whispers. Victor was seated at the head like he always had been, Elias next to him, pale and stone-faced. I took the empty chair across from them, laid my phone on the table. No folder this time, just the truth. Victor cleared his throat and tried his opening act, polished, authoritative. This entire situation has been a gross misunderstanding. Family affairs have become public spectacle. I assure you, this will be resolved internally. I didn't stop him. I let him talk. Let him dig. My son misinterpreted a number of private matters. Click. The audio played through the boardroom speaker, clear as a bell. Elias's voice, ragged and loud. Dad, he knows everything. What do we do? Then earlier, he handled Grandpa's paperwork after the funeral. The room fell quiet. Elias shifted in his seat, jaw clenching. Victor turned a shade redder with every second. You think this means anything? Boys talk, brothers argue. You taught me how to bend words, Father, I interrupted. But Grandpa taught me when they break. The chairman, Harold Lane, a man who'd known Grandpa since the days they built Gage out of sawdust and debt, sat forward. Mr. Gage, he said, voice heavy, do you dispute the documents? Victor didn't answer. He looked at Elias. Elias looked down. That silence said enough. Motion was called. Votes were cast, one by one, hands raised, all except Victor's and Elias's. Unanimous. Victor slammed his palm against the table. You think this makes you better than me? You'll never belong here, Arlen. You were a shadow at this table then, and you're a shadow now. I stood slowly, smoothed the robe at my sides. Then I'll build something that doesn't require shadows. He pointed a finger at me, trembling. This isn't over. I smiled. Just barely. It never was. He stormed out. Reporters waiting at the elevators captured every second. Elias followed behind, shoulders sagging, eyes empty. I stayed, alone now, just me and the sound of the city humming below. I should have felt proud, vindicated. Maybe part of me did. But mostly, I just felt tired. I looked at the seat Grandpa once held during company meetings. No one sat there now. No one could. Later that afternoon, I returned to my office. I placed the candle, still unlit, back on my desk. It had survived storms, betrayal, and silence. It had also survived hope. I sat there a while staring at it, not ready yet. Not today. The rain had started just after nightfall, but now it was relentless, slamming against the tall windows of the study like it wanted in. Wind howled across the bay, and the old floorboards beneath me groaned the way they always had when Grandpa still walked them. The envelope was still there, unopened, heavy somehow, despite its small size. I stared at it again, same as I had last night, same as this morning. My name written in slanted ink across the front. No return address, no markings. Just that. And I already knew who it was from. I picked it up, held it in my palm. Thunder cracked close by, and the lights flickered once. I didn't flinch. I was past flinching now. I tore the envelope open. Inside was a folded letter, creased from too much time, and beneath it, a smaller envelope. Older, yellowed, sealed with a red wax stamp. Grandpa's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. But first, the letter on top. I unfolded it slowly, my hands colder than I realized. The first words pulled the breath right from my chest. You think I hated you, but you remind me too much of who I used to be. I couldn't bear to see my weakness reflected in you. It was Victor's handwriting. His voice echoed through each sentence, flat, measured, but not emotionless. No, This time, it read like something unfinished, something left behind. You challenged me in ways I wasn't man enough to face. You were everything I couldn't control. That's not an excuse, just the truth. I sat down, the storm muffled behind thick walls, my pulse louder than any thunder. My father, the man who once told a room full of investors I was too soft for business, had written this, had tried, and then I saw it. The line at the bottom. If you're reading this, it means I never got to say it out loud. Beneath that, the second envelope. My fingers trembled as I broke the wax seal. Inside wasn't a legal document. No lawyer stamps, no witnesses. Just a handwritten letter dated 3 weeks before Grandpa died. If they ever strip you of my name, remember, I never built this company for them. I built it so you could learn how to rebuild anything they destroy. I see you, Arlen. I've always seen you. And if Victor finds this letter before you, forgive him. He was a better father before he learned to chase ghosts. I didn't cry. I wanted to. But the tears had dried somewhere between anger and exhaustion. All I could do was sit there, holding both letters. One from the man who raised me in silence, the other from the man who raised me in shadow. You both turned love into a battlefield, I muttered. The fireplace crackled, faint warmth against the chill creeping into my bones. I stood, reached for the candle, the one Grandpa never lit on my birthday, and walked it to the hearth. My thumb struck the match. The flame was small at first, but steady. It caught the wick and glowed bright, casting a soft gold light across the room. For the first time, the candle burned. I placed the folded letters beneath it, the wax dripping down like time sealing a wound. A knock came, soft, hesitant. I turned. The storm still howled outside, but the knock came again. I opened the door to find Elias, drenched, shivering, eyes bloodshot, no umbrella, no coat, just a soaked button-down clinging to his frame and hands curled at his sides like he didn't know whether to knock again or run. He looked small. "Dad's gone," he said, voice cracked. "Heart attack." I stared at him. He wasn't lying. I didn't ask how he knew. I didn't ask what room he died in. I didn't even ask if he was alone. "He was writing to you," Elias added, softer now. "When it happened?" I stepped aside, didn't speak, just handed him a towel from the rack near the kitchen. He took it with a nod. Didn't thank me. Didn't need to. We sat in the study. No words. Just two brothers with too much distance between them and no idea how to cross it. His eyes found the candle. The small flicker of orange against the dark wood. "That candle," he whispered. "He used to light it whenever he talked about you." I looked at the flame. Didn't answer. Minutes passed. Finally, Elias leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "He made us believe you didn't care." I turned toward him. Not harsh, just tired. Maybe I didn't fight hard enough to prove I did. He nodded, swallowing hard. We didn't hug. We didn't say sorry. But something passed between us. Maybe not forgiveness, but something like understanding. Outside, the storm kept raging. Inside, something quieter began to settle. Neither of us said much after that. The fire had burned low, and the candle's flame thinned to a soft flicker, almost ready to give out, like it had done its job and could rest. We didn't sleep. We didn't need to. By morning, the storm had passed. The sky broke open with a pale gold light, and the wind carried the last of the rain out to sea. I watched it from the edge of my deck, coffee untouched in my hand, robe folded neatly over my arm. The silence now wasn't heavy. It was clean, like a page turned. The drive to the cemetery was quiet. Just Elias and me in my car, neither reaching for the radio. The burial was small. No cameras, no condolences from people who'd never liked him alive. Just a minister with a kind voice, 2 members from the company's board, a paralegal from the firm that had handled his estate, and us, the Gage sons. Victor's grave faced the Pacific, where the cliff edge gave way to gray water and endless horizon. He'd requested it, apparently. Something about knowing where power ends. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't need to. Elias stood with his hands in his coat pockets, eyes red but dry. He didn't speak, didn't look my way. I didn't force it. When the minister stepped back, the silence stretched, long enough that it was clear they expected someone to say something. Someone had to speak for the man in the ground. They all turned to me. I didn't unfold the robe. I held it at my side like a flag never raised. My father believed legacy was built from control, I began, voice steady, eyes on the waves beyond. My grandfather believed it came from creation. I've learned it comes from courage, the courage to face what we've done to each other. I didn't speak for long. I didn't need to. No apologies, no absolution, just truth, spoken gently into the wind. As I stepped back, Elias shifted beside me. He pulled a small folder from his coat and handed it over without a word. I opened it. Inside was a notarized page, a scanned signature, and a note in our father's hand. Elias didn't look at me as I read it. If my sons ever stand together again, all remaining assets revert to joint ownership, under the name Gage Brothers Holdings. My breath caught, not from shock, from something more complicated, something deeper. The paralegal stepped forward. It's valid. He signed it a week before. She trailed off. Didn't finish the sentence. I didn't say anything either. For the first time in our lives, Victor Gage had given us something we couldn't fight over. Not dominance, not debt. Just something shared. When the minister signaled the end, the casket was lowered. No speeches, no roses. Elias and I stood side by side at the cliff's edge afterward, wind pressing against our coats. The sea below crashed and pulled. That rhythm of destruction and return. We stared at it for a long time. He broke the silence. So, what do we do now? I kept my eyes on the water. We start with silence, I said. Then, maybe something better. No promises, no grand plans, just possibility. We didn't shake hands, we didn't hug. But when we left, we walked toward the same car. That evening, I returned home alone. I didn't light the fireplace. The quiet was enough. I picked up the candle, the one that had followed me through rooms and chapters like a stubborn shadow. I placed it on the windowsill facing the ocean. For the first time, I didn't strike a match. Instead, I let the sunlight touch the wick. Let the wind move through the house uninterrupted. Let the memory of fire become peace, not proof. I took off my watch, set down my phone, folded the robe one last time, and carried it down to the sand just before twilight. The tide was low, the beach wide and empty. I let the robe fall there, its weightless shape folding into the shoreline. No camera, no applause, just me, standing in the place where legacy ended and something real began. And for the first time, I didn't feel erased. I felt written. They erased me because I didn't fit their version of success, but I've learned that real power isn't revenge. It's peace, earned the hard way. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only legacy worth leaving. I walked back toward the house, barefoot in the sand, the sky turning orange, the candle still untouched. No fire this time, only light